Good morning. You're listening to the Eric Vaughn Show with your guest host, Jermaine Reed, and the best engineer in the city of Milwaukee, Mr. Keon. How you doing, Keon?
We love you too, boy. You're so smooth. Good morning.
Well, I haven't woke up just yet, but give me about 5-10 minutes and I got my Barry White going on this morning. Yeah. The maestro.
Yeah, the maestro.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful day. It's 7:07 a.m. on Tuesday morning, the 19th of April. We had some beautiful weather on yesterday.
What about today?
I don't know. It kind of got a little cold, a little cold out there. You know, a little chill on my bones.
42 degrees right now. I got a high of 50 today later on tonight.
Wait, 50? Just 50?
Just 50.
We were like, what, mid-70s, almost 80s yesterday.
Yeah, buddy.
Man, I didn't know how to act, but I knew this was going to happen. I knew it.
You're in Wisconsin.
Yeah, we should know by now, but yeah. So it's a beautiful day, a lot going on in the world. Just glad to be alive. If you want to join our conversation today, you know it's always good to talk to folks. I know Eric is not here, and it's really kind of intimidating to come and try to fill those shoes. Eric is a phenomenal broadcaster, media person, and but. If you all be so kind to talk to your friend over here, Jermaine, you can call 414-444-5250. I don't know how Eric get up every morning like this,
Grumbling.
I know in terms of my preparation coming, I never can really sleep really well the night before because I'm afraid I'm going to sleep through. Yeah. Because I'm used to, getting up and then laying back down in the middle of the night and maybe get into the office about 9:30.
You got a rooster in the house?
I ain't got no rooster. No.
Oh, yeah. See, Eric, one of them 4 a.m. guy, he didn't wake up because it's early in the morning, start writing and reading and,
Yeah, but you got to get up. You got to move around. You got to wash up. If you're going to eat a little something, just a lot, But glad to be here at the Eric Vaughn Show, and we're going to have an interesting conversation. We'll start with some local news, what's going on. Summerfest. They announced their lineup, their headliners for this year. They're bringing in Willie Nelson.
Oh,
on the road again.
Just can't wait to get on. Mama,
I didn't know Willie was still rolling.
And he's still rolling, too.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess. He's 80-some years old. He's been around a long time. Like him and Kenny Rogers. Not that I know a whole lot about country singers, but I can remember from my childhood that he definitely was one of those who kind of stand out. So, and I think, it's a generational thing now. Some folks in his family are singing as well. But he will be at the Summerfest this year. I don't know. I might go see Willie. I was in Vegas. You gonna see Willie?
I will go see Willie.
Oh, really? I wonder how many people out there, because I'm a black person. I love country music. And it's kind of funny because I was raised on 3174 North 11th Street, so that's between Burleigh and Ring. And in the summertime, yeah, I'm 53206, baby.
Are you up the street from me, 11th Street? Yeah.
11th Street, yeah.
Boy.
You might have been that bully. I'm looking at you now. I knew you looked familiar.
Unless you were just my height when I was 7.
But I remember, just blasting my country music out of my bedroom window. And I was just content. I was happy. I was poor, hungry, sitting around listening to Garth Brooks and Willie Nelson.
I like Garth Brooks, too.
Yeah. So those Brooks and Dunn. So that's what I used to do, back in the day.
Strange like me.
Yeah, a little strange, a little off. Yeah, but yeah, so Willie's going to be there, and I might get a ticket. I saw him actually in Vegas one time, and I was walking through the casino, because that's where my hotel was, walking through the casino, and there was Willie Nelson, with the long braid and everything, real cool guy. That was about 15, 20 years ago. Who else is coming to the Summerfest? On July 1st, Mighty, just letting it all hang out. A brick house. The Commodores.
The Commodores?
Yeah, of course, Lionel's not with the Commodores. I would like to see the reunion concert with the Commodores and Lionel Richie.
Yeah.
That would be classic.
I wonder if that's possible.
I don't know. I never knew what the rift was between them. Yeah, 3 Times a Lady, Still, Truly. Yeah, they had some really nice classic songs. Zoom.
Whoa.
Oh, watch out, Lionel.
Don't stop me this morning. I'm having too much fun.
Yeah, but I didn't really recognize the other folks that they have lining up. So that would be interesting to see what their attendance is going to be like, I imagine they're going to continue to add on some additional acts as we get closer to the event. One thing, Nelly will be there, and Kurt Franklin. You know, they say I kind of look a little like Kurt Franklin, but I think his head is a little bit bigger than mine. I don't know. But yeah, so Kurt gonna be there.
Praise like Kurt Franklin,
man. Oh, and guess another legend, Paul McCartney.
Oh yeah,
Paul, July 8th. Paul is about 70 years old. And they say, you know what? He gives a 2-3 hour concert nonstop.
Well, Paul is phenomenal. I mean, Paul has written a lot of songs that have been covered by all
A number of artists, yeah.
genres, races, remade, covered. Yeah, Paul is strong.
Wow. And then over there at the Wisconsin Dells, let's say they're talking about building a swimming pool, a massive new swimming pool that can fit 2,000 people. That's like a lake, isn't it?
Yeah.
2,000 people.
Yeah.
Hope everybody clean,
Somebody-
be in a pool with a whole bunch of nasty people.
Somebody gonna
Something
get
ain't
hurt.
right about that.
Yeah. Where'd you say they trying to build it at?
At Wisconsin Dells, I'm not sure exactly which. Mount Olympus. Yeah. Now, I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
We people, we try to accomplish some major feats. You know what really has always got. You remember some years ago when the levees broke on the mighty Mississippi and the
Yeah.
Dells flooded?
Yeah.
It just what amazed me was how we as people try to take God's tremendous, God's creation and control it.
Yeah.
How do you levee the mighty Mississippi? I just thought about
Man,
that.
I don't know. But, I often think about, when we look at slavery, the history of our people and how they crossed rivers and, wading in the water. How did they know how deep the water was? Just that quest for
Still
freedom.
waters run deep. I guess it didn't matter based on what they was
Well,
running from.
yeah, it couldn't be no right. When they took
got
that
too
risk,
deep, they
that
just started swimming.
started swimming. Yeah, but yeah. So this Mount Olympus theme park, they have a pool they call the Great Pool of Delphi, and it will be 27,000 square feet. It will be big enough to accommodate 2,000 swimmers, and it's costing $4 million. They already have the they had another pool which contains 1.5 million gallons of water. So I guess they already had a large pool. But when I'm looking at this, who has $4 million to build a pool? $4 million.
Somebody
That's a
that
lot.
buys their doggies bracelets and stuff.
I don't know, but it's my understanding from what James Causey has written, I guess yesterday in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, is that the Urban League's president and CEO will retire later this year.
Oh,
Ralph Holman. So how long has he been in that position?
Oh, I'm not sure. Probably longer than I can remember.
According to this article, he is a fundraising expert, and he's raised over $20 million for the Milwaukee Urban League over the past 14 years to help move people toward self-sufficiency. His plans is to pay off the Urban League's $400,000 mortgage and leave the agency with $100K in the bank.
Like that guy.
Yeah, so he's going to have a mortgage burning ceremony at the Urban League's 31st annual Black and White Ball on June 11th. Have you ever been there?
No.
They say it's quite the event. I've never been, and I always forget about it. Then I'll see pictures in the Community Journal, some local news outlet, and I'm like, dog, I missed it. But I've been wanting to go for the last 10 years. So maybe given that President Holman will be stepping down just to support that effort, I will get me a ticket so I can go to the Black and White Ball.
Oh, yeah, you're going to be clean as a skeeter's Pete.
Yeah.
You
We say casket ready. You know how we can do it.
That's a casket
I went over here
ready.
to the little Asian store, had them cut me up a little suit or something like that,
They don't know how to do it no more.
It's 7:16 in the morning on the Eric Vaughn Show, and we're just having a good time. Let me see. Also, I read yesterday, and maybe somebody else covered it on one of the talk shows. I didn't get a chance to tune in to Sherwin or 11:30. Every now and then I peek over there and see what folks are talking about. But Milwaukee County District Attorney Chisholm announced his re-election bid.
Oh, yeah.
Now, he's been the DA since 2007, so we're talking, 9 years?
Handpicked by E. Michael McCann.
Was that who picked him? He was appointed?
Oh,
Okay.
Ooh, that guy.
Oh, okay. Okay. You know what? I want to go back to something before I talk about that, and I guess I don't really have much to say about his announcement. It was just an announcement, so we'll see how that go out. It's election season, so this fall. So, but going back to the Summerfest, have you ever thought about it? The Summerfest being Meyer Festival Ground.
Henry Meyer Festival Ground, yeah.
And I think that's really interesting, given the racial history of America and what he symbolized. I've always wondered why. See, and that's why I probably will not go to see the Commodores or Kurt Franklin or anybody, because I just have a problem with that. So I haven't been to Summerfest for years.
Summerfest was his baby. He started it, so he got the naming rights.
I guess that's how it goes. But I ain't going down there.
Now, I could see if it was like if the county was Chief Harold Breyer Detention Center, then I'd really have a problem with that. But.
Well, I have some concerns with the detention center actually being named after a black woman, considering what happens to black families. When you talk about the juvenile justice court center, the Vale Phillips. The Honorable Vale Phillips Juvenile Justice Center. And when you look at what happens to black families in that facility, and when you look at her rich legacy, I've always had some concern about those two. Did they match? Was there a balance there? The number of African-American children through termination of parental rights, being removed from their families, and some of them have their community and biological ties forever severed, through that facility. When we look at 80% plus, the individuals who are housed out there, African-American, and, how corrective is or rehabilitative is corrections. And for the first black female judge in this state and first black woman to graduate from law school in Wisconsin, for that building to bear her name, it's always been a little concern of mine. Maybe not to other folks in the community, but just given what the politics are and what happens, the bureaucracy in terms of disenfranchising black families. So I know we're going to take a break, and on the other side of this break, we're going to be talking about a very hot topic around child sexual abuse prevention. In just period, child sexual abuse prevention. Going to give some folks some tips on what they can do to reduce the risk of their children, grandchildren being violated.
And before we go to break, it gives you your quote for today. Life is short. It's up to you to make it sweet. Life is short. It's up to you to make it sweet. That's from African-American educator and civil rights pioneer Sarah Sadie Delaney, who ironically lived to be 110 years old. So life is short, and it's up to you to make it sweet. We're going to take a pause for the calls, and on the other side, we'll return with Jermaine Reed on the Eric Vaughn Show. Right back after these.
It is Tuesday morning on the Eric Vaughn Show. I am the guest host, Jermaine Reed. I'm doing good this morning.
Yes, you are doing very well, Mr. Jermaine.
I might can have a career in broadcasting.
Man,
I don't know.
Most definitely.
I don't know, but it is 7:27 a.m. on Tuesday morning. So if you have to be at work at 8 o'clock, you have 33 minutes to get there. Drive careful. No road rage out there. And what are we talking about? I like the little first segment we had, but we're talking about child sexual abuse prevention. This month, April, actually is Child Abuse Prevention Month. So this is actually fits in line with that. And for most folks who are listening to the program this morning, probably are familiar with the Wednesday afternoon program called Fresh Start Today, which I host along with Sean Roby from Fresh Start Family Services, one of very few African-American owned foster care agencies in the state of Wisconsin. And I did hear the announcement about the Colored Child Welfare Conference, so we'll give an opportunity for two people to win free registration to that conference on May 17th. It will be held at the Crown Plaza Hotel, the airport location.
What, colored child or color of
the
child?
Color of Child Welfare.
Oh,
and the reason why it's called the Colored Child Welfare because most folks may not be aware, but in Milwaukee County, 68.2% of the children who make up our local foster care system are African American, according to the Department of Children and Families' most recent annual report. 68.2%. So that's almost 70%. So that's why it's called the Colored Child Welfare. And children come into care for a number of reasons, not just because of involuntary removals, but sometimes parents voluntarily place their children in care. Sometimes in situations where there are no other family members and someone has relocated here, they died, and they got to figure out where those folks go. And then another portion of that population, very small percentage, but they're still part of that 68.2%, are individuals who are licensed relatives of children who are legally in the system care. So they are technically foster children as well. But either way it go, I often tell folks that if white children were removed at the same rate that black children were removed from their families, we will see aggressive, effective child welfare reform.
Yeah.
So, the Colored Child Welfare Conference, May 17th, we have a number of national and local folks coming in to speak. Some of our local speakers will be Senator Nakia Dodd Harris and Wanda Montgomery from the Black Child Development Institute. On a national level, we have Dr. Stacey Patton. We have Judge S. Pamela Gray, who was formerly in foster care, and now she's running the court system out there in D.C. And the same thing with Dr. Stacey Patton. So we have a number of folks who were formerly in the system. Not all of our presenters were formerly in care, but they are qualified to address some of these issues that we see. Our theme this year is from Against All Odds, from Foster Care to Success. So we will give caller number 5 a free registration to the conference in a few minutes. I'm going to give a quiz question and see if you all can answer that and win the ticket. But we're going to be talking about a very sensitive topic, and I'm not referencing any particular situation because the pervasiveness of child sexual abuse is so extensive in all communities that it is something that, although we don't like to wake up at 7:30 in the morning and talk about these issues, the seriousness of it is something that we need to make sure that we are constantly engaging in this conversation in a respectful way, not just in an emotional way, because sometimes what we'll do, we'll get really emotional about stuff, and it's kind of hard to say don't get emotional when you're talking about offenses to children.
You're supposed to.
Well, but it's not an aggressive emotion. Or as an ignorant emotion, but it's having an informed, intelligent conversation around some very hard, creating a safe place to have a hard conversation. So that's what I typically like to do.
Yeah, you're good because, 7:30 is a good time to talk about it. Wake up and say, hey, good morning. Leave the kids alone. And that's what you do.
But it's something, that's happening all across the country. And folks, if they've listened to Fresh Start Today, I have, over the last year, since March 2015, I believe it was, started these series talking about, it was the Child Sexual Abuse Prevention Series, and we've talked about how to identify a sexual predator. We've talked about parent-child incest. We've talked about, and you remember some of those broadcasts, parent-child incest. We've talked about sibling incest. We've talked about juvenile sex offenders, and try to dispel some of the common myths around sexual abuse. And so for caller number 5, before we even get deep into this discussion, I'm going to ask a question, and I'm going to see if, in fact, you can answer the question. And that is, can you tell me whether or not this is true or false, that most sexual assaults are committed by strangers? Are most sexual assaults committed by a stranger, particularly child sexual assaults? If you think you have the answer to that, the correct answer, you only can go one or two ways. But if you think you have the right answer, you should give us a call at 414-444-5250. 414-444-5250.
I know I got the answer. I'm going to hold mine, though.
You're going to hold your answer? Yeah. All right. So there's cases both nationally and locally. A lot goes on with children, and children are just vulnerable. Children are vulnerable. The statistics show that there are nearly 60 million adult survivors of child sexual abuse. 60 million adult survivors. That's a lot of people. 60 million people. Can you imagine? 60 million. Well, we have a caller. Is that true or false that most child sexual assaults are committed by strangers? I'm sorry. Next caller. True or false?
Hello. Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. Can you tell me whether or not most child sexual assaults are committed by strangers?
I want to say it's more of someone that they know, like a family member or someone that's close to the family.
Now, what's your name?
Sherry.
Good morning, Sherry. Sherry, you are absolutely correct. According to all the national data, this is so important that, and I've seen statistics ranging from 90% to 93%. And 90 to 93% of all cases of child sexual abuse, that child has a relationship with the offender. And so that right there, really, when we were growing up in school, Sherry, I'm not sure how old you are, but do you remember that thing called stranger danger?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
Well, it was a campaign to say, that folks children need to be looked out. I mean, the police will come in, and I think there was some type of mascot. I can't remember. It was McGruff. I don't know who it was, but they'll come in and talk to the kids, and they'll talk about, that you got to watch out for the little man with the trench coat on, and walking the dog, or try to offer you candy, and
Sure.
And that strangers pose a greater risk of violating or harming children. But we didn't often hear about, and so Sherry, we're going to get your information offline, because we're going to give you that registration to the Color Child Welfare Conference, and I'm going to continue this dialogue. All right? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Congratulations. Sure. But, with that whole stranger danger thing, when we were growing up, we were always on the lookout. We were looking out versus inward. Nobody ever told us that mostly in family settings is where child sexual abuse actually occurs. And so what we end up doing was, looking at the neighbors and looking at folks at the park, wondering whether or not they were going to harm our children. So 90 to 93% of all child sexual assault victimization occur with folks who have a relationship. And so in this conversation today, we're going to be talking about what some of those grooming techniques are. People in a variety of capacities. So when you're talking about trusted relationships, those individuals can look like coaches, they can look like teachers, they can look like clergy, they can look like Boy Scout leaders. Another population that we don't talk about is the prevalence of female sex offenders. Another profile characteristic is an individual who is an upstanding figure in the community, who's married with children. Those are the classic characteristics and traits of a child sex offender. So, thanks a lot, Sherry. We will get you that free registration to the Color Child Welfare Conference. Now, I've been working with children for over 16 years, children who have been victims of child sexual abuse in many cases. For example, in foster care, there's a national data, and I'm going to tell you where that site is at. But national data, one is, let me see, Mama Rose, let me see here. I got to get my data right here. That 75% of all children who are in the foster care system, before they leave the foster care system, will have experienced sexual abuse. That 75% of all children who are in the foster care system have experienced some form of abuse. So we'll kind of talk about the prevalence of institutional sexual abuse. It happens in child care centers. It happens in institutions of learning. It happens in churches. It happens at recreational facilities. And that's one reason why I really, I'm kind of skeptical about places like the Boys and Girls Club and the YMC. I've always been concerned about the type of supervision, adult supervision, that's in those places. And we live in such a hypersexual environment that we have to be really careful in terms of where we allow our children to hang out and with whom. So we'll talk about some preventive measures, strategies, identify some signs or symptoms that maybe perhaps your child has been sexually abused, and then also offer some resources to the community. Also, Sherry, in about 5 minutes, if you can call back because we need to get your information. But if you want to join this conversation or you have a comment, please feel free to give us a call here at 414-444-5250. 17.7 million women in the U.S. have been victims of rape or attempted rape at some point in their lives, according to the National Institute of Justice Centers for Disease Control. More than 1/3 of women who were raped as minors were also raped as adults, compared to 14% without an early rape history. What we need to understand about child sexual abuse, there's a couple things, because we often focus on physical contact.
Yeah.
And say that constitutes child sexual abuse. But folks also have to be aware that such abuse could also include non-physical contact. Non-physical abuse. How is that? That's what exposure. It could be exposure to pornography.
Oh, I got you. Yeah.
You know, and it's not always the genitalia. Sometimes, you know, you can touch a kid inappropriately by the way you hug them. Groping them, and you know, so there's non-touch. There's exposure to certain type of if two adults are in a sexual relationship in the other room and children are witnessing that, by law, that is sexual abuse.
Yeah.
So there's non-touch. And, you know, a lot of times, as I was getting ready to say, you know, we talk about this physical touch piece, and we're thinking this, if we could just use the term penis to vagina, you know, those are medical terms, you know, folks don't have to get alarmed, we all adults. And we say, okay, well, that's rape. But, you know, it's also exposure. Somebody can expose themselves to you. That was not a physical touch. It was exposure. So there is a such thing as non-physical touch, and that the incidence of non-physical touch is actually higher than physical.
I thought that was considered lewd behavior.
Well, it is inappropriate sexual behavior.
Yeah.
You know, it is lewd behavior. It's inappropriate. That's what lewd means. It's outside the norm. There's something abnormal about it.
I didn't know they would consider it non-physical abuse. Assault. Yeah, that's cool.
Non-contact is a form of non-contact abuse. And so in talking to our children, and that's really when we talk about prevention, that is critical, that we have open, candid conversations with our children about risk factors, you know, and just conversation, dialogue, period, because, and let me just use this term, Uncle Johnny may not touch you, but if he exposes himself to you, you know, that's not healthy. That's not good. If the mom's boyfriend, mom's or grandma's boyfriend expose themselves to you, you know, it's not good. But when talking to children about touch, it's really important to say that, okay, you may not be lying in a bed somewhere, but if somebody put their hand on your shoulder and it makes you feel uncomfortable, you need to teach our children how to communicate that discomfort, how to share that information, so that, you know, there's ways, grooming techniques that people use, offenders use, you know, just to see, I'll touch your shoulder here, then I'll touch another place, and I'll touch another place. Now it's full-fledged, outright, you know, some serious violation. So, you know, we're talking about those things. You're listening to the Eric Vaughn Show today, and we're going to be talking about the profile of a sex offender. This is our Child Abuse Prevention Month in America, and so we're going to talk about those things. Again, Sherry, you can give us a call back at 414-444-5250. That would be greatly appreciated. Now, let's begin. First, I want to talk about terms, because we use terms sometimes interchangeably. Terms. Is my speech that messed up this morning?
I'm just wondering.
Terms, grounds.
Gotcha.
We use certain terms or words interchangeably to describe people or things. When we're talking about child sexual abuse prevention, the terms sexual or sex offender, the terms pedophile, opportunist, those are different types of. They have different meanings.
Yes.
Now, the sex offender typically is a person who has been convicted of a sex-related crime, which may or may not involve a person who is considered a child under the law. So they typically it's a conviction of a first degree, you know, and the first degree. sexual assault. Now, pedophile is more so a clinical term. It's a clinical term. Somebody with a psychologist, psychiatrist, someone has evaluated this individual and said, based on the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the DSM-5 now, which is considered to be the Bible of mental health disorders, somebody has evaluated or assessed this individual and said they are a pedophile. What exactly does that mean from a clinical perspective? Well, what it means is that it calls that person to have a primary or exclusive sexual attraction to prepubescent boys and girls.
Yeah.
So you have a person who has a sexual attraction to a child. That pedophile may not necessarily touch that child, may not make physical contact with a child. They just have a strong sexual attraction to a child. And in America, in Western culture, that would be considered inappropriate.
Prepubescent.
Prepubescent. So pre-adolescent boys.
Basically.
You know,
Don't like adults.
well, it's not to say that they don't like
Attracted
adults.
to children, to youth, to prepubescent.
Well, their primary attraction. Some people say exclusive attraction. So their primary attraction, because remember, the thing about whether you're talking about sex offenders, pedophiles, these individuals could be married. And in most cases, I mean, we had on the show last week, we had attorney Nathaniel Foote from Androzati and Associates law firm down in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And that law firm represented 11 victims that was involved in the Jerry Sandusky and Penn State, criminal case. And so when you look at Jerry Sandusky, he was a married man. He was affluent. He had stature in the community. He was looked up to. Jerry, he's a nice guy. And most sex offenders, or pedophiles are individuals who will come off as being very nice guys, So those are just some common characteristics. But going back to this whole thing about terms, pedophile just basically deal with an individual who has a strong, whether that's primary or whether that is an exclusive, but they have a strong sexual attraction towards children. So you got to ask yourself, are all pedophiles sex offenders? Well, those terms are interchangeable, but a sex offender can be a pedophile.
Yeah.
But a pedophile does not necessarily is a sex offender.
Gotcha.
Okay. So we're able to get that caught up. And Sherry, if you can call us back at 414-444-5250. Yes, sir.
Now, you referenced something. You said DSM number 5.
The Diagnostic Statistical Manual is like
Gotcha.
an encyclopedia of mental health disorder. If you've heard bipolar, schizophrenia, reactive attachment disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, opposition defiant disorder, conduct disorder, all of those disorders are defined in this particular, we call it the Bible of mental health disorder.
DSM.
Yeah, DSM-5. And every so couple of years, every often they will release an edition. They revise it. And so what was ADHD 10 years ago now is looking like something else.
Lord.
It's all research stuff.
ADHD.
But according to that, that particular document or Bible of mental health disorders, pedophilia deals with a strong attraction to pre-adolescent boys or girls. And pedophiles can be male, they can be female.
Yeah.
Sex offenders can be male, they can be female. They are educated, some are uneducated. They're wealthy, some are not wealthy. Some are related to folks, others are not related to folks. So,
Gotcha.
And the other piece too, when we deal with, there's juvenile sex offenders, and they comprise a much larger population of offenders than the adults out of reported because most sexual abuse and sexual assault or inappropriate sexual behavior goes unreported. And there's a number of reasons why children or individuals do not report sexual abuse, and we'll get off into that a little bit later. But we want to really kind of talk about those terms. And so this is the thing that folks, I think, is really important to know when we talk about the pervasiveness of child sexual abuse. According to Megan's Law, I'm going to give you all some statistics to show you about how that population of individuals is growing, the reported population, okay? Megan's Law, Parents for Megan's Law, and the Crime Victim Center is a non-for-profit 501c3 organization that's dedicated to the prevention and treatment of child sexual abuse and rape, the provision of services to victims of violent crime and elderly and disabled and minor victims of all crime. So this organization, which is a leading institution in the country that deals with advocacy and educating the community about preventing sexual abuse, what they reported that in the United States of America in 2015, there were 796,598 individuals who were registered sex offenders.
Sex offender.
So, 796,598. That was in 2015. 2016, their numbers are reflecting to date is 805,835.
Be on alert coming to a neighborhood near you.
Well, now in Wisconsin, because this website, and folks can go to it, Megan's Law, if they type that into their computer, Megan's Law, it'll come up. meganslaw.ca.gov, these statistics will come up. But in Wisconsin, this site breaks down every state's registered sex offenders. In 2015, there was 23,480 registered sex offenders. In 2016, according to this site, 24,123. So you're talking almost about 1,000 more. Mm-hmm. Then we also know that registered sex offenders have a tendency to be targeted in certain communities or zip codes. And you can go to family members if you want to know if there are registered sex offenders in your neighborhood, in your community. You can go to the Department of Corrections website and look it up. They can provide that information. But you also can go to, Watchdog. It is www.familywatchdog.us. Family Watchdog is a free service to help locate registered sex offenders in your area. So while we see these numbers, 800,000 nationwide, 24,000 in the state of Wisconsin, we have to remember there are more sex offenders who are not on paper than those who are on paper.
That's what I was going to say.
Right. Now, another national statistic that is really important is that 90% of the individuals who are sex offenders go under the radar. What do we talk about, or what do we mean when we talk about 90% of sex offenders go under the radar, or less than 10% are actually registered? They are under the supervision of corrections, less than 10%. When we look at those numbers, what that says to us is that the larger portion of sex offenders, pedophiles, opportunists, sexual predators, those individuals can pass a background screen test. They're working in the various capacities. They have access to our children. In most cases of sexual abuse and violation, sexual trauma, it happens within the confines of family settings. That's the other piece. So while we are concerned about registered sex offenders, we have to take the appropriate steps to make sure that we educate our children, give them tools and information. It's called prevention. And all of us have the responsibility to make sure that we are giving our children the tools that they need to protect themselves. If you'd like to join this conversation, you can call 414-444-5250, 414-442-5250. Now, the thing about child sexual abuse, sexual assault, sexual trauma is not that it's just an issue of immorality, that it's an immoral issue, but it's a criminal issue. Child sexual abuse is a crime. And that's how we as a community have to approach child sexual abuse. Now, it's funny because, like I was saying, it's not funny. I take that back. That's the wrong choice of words. It's interesting how a lot of the children that I've worked with, in all honesty, in foster care, many of them have a sexual trauma background. That's before they come into foster care. So if children have a sexual trauma background, where did the trauma happen at? And this is the part that I don't think that we like to talk about because it's so uncomfortable, but it's been a part of our history forever. Yeah. And I remember there was a time when we, was focusing on, that happens over there. That happens just white folks. No. I was amazed when I saw and was reading reports on my desk where grandfathers were sexually abusing their granddaughters and their grandsons. Because what most people are not aware of is that boys are the number of boys who are sexually offended are like neck and neck in terms of the number of girls who are, who are sexually offended. And boys and girls deal with sexual abuse and trauma differently, just like men and women. We have Phyllis on the line. Phyllis, good morning. You're listening to the Eric Vaughn Show with Jermaine.
Good morning, Jermaine. Jermaine, good morning. I was just calling. I'm enjoying the show this morning, and I was just listening. I've been a foster parent for a number of years, and I've adopted 7 of my children. And then I listened to you talk about you should be aware of the Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA. And, and I was, when I had my children when they were younger. But my children all just thought I was the worst parent, or me and my husband were the worst parents, because we didn't allow them to go to these places unless we were there with them or, spend the night at friends' house. That was all out. But, I had to think about these children when I had them, because I'm sure I know they were all traumatized when they came into our care in some form or fashion, whether it was sexual assault or was it a mental, or was it physical. But, I always thought about the children, I can't let you go there. No, I'm sorry, they just all thought I was the worst parents in the world. And I even had a biological daughter that I protected the same way, I didn't try to overprotect, but I did protect. If they wanted to go with friends, I'll be there watching you in the park playing with your friends. They were just all so upset. They're all adults now. But, and they realized why I protected them,
Mm-hmm.
I just said, I just can't let you, I can't let anything happen to you, I believe that, and this is, like you said, with boys and girls. I had 3 boys and 3 girls, and I just was not going to allow anything to happen to the children under my watch.
That's great.
So I just believe in, protecting them and watching out for them when you do it. Do it for the right reasons. Don't do it just for the monetary reasons or things like that. Do it to love these children, protect them from all of this abuse.
Yes.
So that was my comment I had to say, okay? Thanks, Jermaine.
Some very good information. Thanks a lot, Phyllis. Al, you're listening to the Eric Vaughn Show with Jermaine. Good morning. Oh, Al, Al, give us a call back at 414-444-5250, 414-444-5250. Now, when we talk about the profile of a child molester, sex offender, and again, that's another term, child molester, sexual abuse, sexual assault, they all carry different meanings. But to me, in regards to whether you're a pedophile, an opportunist, sexual offender, a child molester, having or engaging in an inappropriate relationship with a child is unacceptable. So we don't want to get caught up in just what the label was, that person convicted of a first-degree crime, second-degree crime. We don't want to get caught into all that kind of stuff. We have to be on the lookout. We have to be on our guard when it comes down to child sexual abuse. We have a caller on Fresh Start Today. Caller, you have a question or comment as relates to this topic?
Yes. I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Is a 17-year-old lesbian having sex with a 15-year-old girl, is that considered abuse? And I'll get off the line.
All right. The real short answer there is that in the state of Wisconsin, if you're not 18 years old, you cannot consent to having sex. So, and there have been cases, depending on how, the courts look at it, where I know of a case, actually, I know a case very closely where there was an individual who had sex with a 15-year-old, and now they are a registered sex offender. And that happened when No, I'm sorry. They were 18. I take that back. They were 18 and that person was 15. But children cannot give consent to have sex. So whether that is sexual abuse, I believe it would be. But I think an attorney would be a person who could give you a more informed or legal response to that.
You know, what really freaked me out was about 5 years ago, I had come, for some reason it all came to fruition, or it all came to me at once. I had realized that about 90%, I may even add a few percentage points to that, of the women that I knew and grew up with
Have been sexually abused.
have been sexually abused before they were 7 years old.
Before. Wow.
And it answered a lot of questions, you know, about how they carried themselves, how they handled themselves, how they handled men, the relationship aspect of it. And then further along, you know, dealing in community the last few years, it was heart-wrenching to me the number of boys that have been sexually assaulted by family members. These kids have issues way deeper than what we were dealing with growing up. And a lot of what's going on out here is because of the emotional and painful things that are, how can I say it, kept within.
Well, you know what? Let me say something, because thinking about what you're saying, looking at all the referrals that I get across my desk or on my screen, and I'm reading the family history and the content or the reason why a child was coming into care, and sometimes sexual abuse is not the reason why the child came into care, but it's one of those underlying issues that it happened or whatever. A lot of times there's this generational abuse that goes on.
Exactly.
Where the child was sexually abused, the mom was sexually abused, or the dad was sexually abused. Yeah. And it's important to say the dad was sexually abused, because that's a different era, different time where we weren't thinking that men and boys were being sexually abused. But that has been a part of history.
It's more prevalent than you may think.
And so how do we as a community and as a family protect children within that construct? See, that is the conversation that we have to have, because all the national data shows that home, school, and church are the three most high-risk environments for children. Home, school, and church.
The places where you should be
where
the safest.
you should be the safest are often the places where you're at most at risk.
And also, when you say home, the foster care piece, what the numbers of people that I grew up with that you didn't know till 30 years later were in foster care, is amazing to me.
Yeah.
You know, when you talk to somebody about, because I've had conversations with people, you know, you're laughing about the past, and they say, you know what, I really don't remember that, because my life was this, and that, and, you know, we had some hard times, but you never knew while you were dealing with people the things they were going through. And with that, I can say about 40% of the people I grew up with were in foster care, and I had no clue, no idea. You just thought that was the normal family. That wasn't my brother for real. That wasn't my sister for real. That's not my mom. That's my foster mom. It's like, wow, amazing.
Really interesting. Now, so in terms of this family setting, you know, I was looking at something that Dr. Iyanla Vanzant had said. And she was saying she had a mommy rule. And I think it's a pretty good rule. She was saying that she never allowed her daughter to be left alone with a man. And he said, well, wait a minute. Well, why wouldn't you let your daughter be left alone with a man? She said it's just not good practice. It's not good prevention. And she was talking about, you know, whether that is a older brother, whether that is teacher, whether that's an uncle or whatever. She says she just don't believe that girls should be left alone with men. Now, you do have some situations where you have men who are single parents and they're raising their daughters, of course, in those situations. But even so, because there's such a high number of sexual abuse that's happening, parent-child incest that occurs, that it's really important that children are educated to be on guard and what they should look like, you know, what they should look out for, what is appropriate touch, what's not good touch, bad touch, those basic things. So, you know what, the question that I have, you know, in thinking about Iyanla Vanzant's position, you know, that girls should not be left alone with older boys and men, give me a call at 414-444-5250 and let me know what your thoughts are about that. Should girls be left alone with older siblings of the opposite sex and men? So in looking at this, that a lot of abuse will occur within the confines of the family setting. The issue is, and I'm thinking about something, you know, there was a report that I had just read within the last, I'll say, 6 months, and in that particular case, there was a lot of family trauma. There was a lot of various types of abuse, and one of the abuse identified that came out years later is that the older brother was involved sexually with one of their younger siblings. And the child exhibited certain behaviors that folks didn't understand why this person was acting the way they were acting, didn't want to be around or left alone with this sibling, and was kind of reprimanded for that. But given the construct of the family, there were a number of children, and older children had to look out and watch out for the younger siblings, that it created an opportunity in a case like this for sexual abuse to occur. Mom was working outside of the home, dad was not in the home, and it just created this opportunity. So I was looking at that, and unfortunately, there are a lot of referrals that I get, and again, predominantly of some type of child sexual abuse that happened with folks that these individuals trusted. So you're listening to the Eric Vaughn Show on Tuesday morning. It's 8:05 after the hour, and it's a great conversation. We have a caller on WNOV. Caller, good morning.
Hi, good morning. How are you? This is Cindy Jermaine. How are you?
I'm doing great. Cindy?
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning. I just think that the affirmation you made, or that Ayanna Van made, is probably better to err on the safe side of not having girls in alone. That way, even if there's an implication, because some of those sexual assault type things you spoke of are not easy to prove or disprove, and particularly if you're dealing with a foster child, who you don't really want that accusation. It's a horrible thing for, first of all, the child, and then second of all, God forbid, I have known situations where there were teenagers involved and the accusation wasn't true. But by the same token, I've also had contact with people who've gone through it with mom's boyfriends and different people. You can't leave your children with people. You just can't leave your children with people all the time. It's just, and I don't know what the litmus test is for. There's no perfect way, I don't think, but I think you have to be very selective and prayerful before you allow somebody to take care. Children are precious, and you need to be very protective of them.
Cindy, I appreciate your response, and you said a couple of things I'm going to respond to. But
Sure.
One thing is that children, as you indicate, they are a precious resource. And the thing about childhood, you only have one chance at it.
That's right.
And if we're not careful to protect childhood, individual childhood, we can set them on a trajectory down a path of doom and pain and instability, dysfunctionalism. So we really have to do what we can do to protect children's past. I love something that the Children's Defense Fund executive director Marian Wright Edelman, she said that if we don't stand up for children, we don't stand up for anything.
That's right. That's right.
And it's all of our responsibility. And since we know that it's prevalent, you know what? The reality is that everybody that's listening to this show knows a sexual offender, predator, pedophile. That's how pervasive it is. We all know somebody. And given that this population exists, we have to be responsible. We have to be informed. Now, let me say something. As it relates to sexual offending, juvenile sex offenders are typically between the ages of 13 and 17. Generally, but not always, they're male. 30 to 60% exhibit learning disabilities, academic dysfunction. Up to 80% are diagnosed with some type of psychiatric disorder. Many have difficulties with impulse control and judgment. 20 to 50% have histories of physical abuse. That's another area that we need to address and talk about. And then we also know that 40 to 80% of them have histories of sexual abuse. So when we look at those terms, we look at the type of sex offenders that are out there. We know that they're male, we know they're female. I was looking at in terms of white female teachers. You all may remember Deborah Beasley LaFay. She was a 23-year-old teacher at Angelo L. Greco Middle School, Temple Terrace, Florida, when she was arrested for having multiple sexual encounters with a 14-year-old student throughout various locations in the school. Then remember the infamous Mary Kay Letourneau. She was married. She was an elementary school teacher in Sherwood Elementary School in Burien, Washington, when she began a relationship with a 6th grade student. She had previously taught in 2nd grade. Her father was a congressman in California, so that socioeconomic piece right there is not just poor people, it's not just black folk who sexualize their kids, but you have white teachers, females at that. And, that is a population that somehow we have not been able to reconcile in our minds that white teachers could have sex with their students. And it's a phenomenon across this country when you look at the data. And Mary, Mary Kay Letourneau, she took it a step further. She messed around and married.
I was going to say, didn't one of them
married? She married, the boy, the young man, he was, before she went to jail, she got him pregnant. He got her pregnant. And then she came out of jail, wasn't supposed to have contact with him, got pregnant again, went and finished her time, got out, and they got married. They're still married today. So, yeah. So we have Al on the Eric Vaughn Show. Good morning, Al.
Good morning. I'm just calling because of the topic. There's two things in my mind. One is working with high school kids for almost 50 years. A lot of charges are filed against young people when they are teenagers, and people classify them as sexual predators, but they're not. These are things going on in teenage lives that basically, yes, it's wrong, but it's a learning process. And I've got a client right now who had a charge against him at 17 in high school that's haunting him to this day.
Okay.
He'd done everything that he's supposed to do legally. He served his time, but the question is, when does the sentence end? Now, there's a major difference between a sexual predator and a sexual offender.
Okay. And
I would really like for you to clarify that for the audience, because everyone assumes that someone who has been charged with a sex crime is a predator, and that is not the truth.
All right. Thanks a lot. So in terms of sexual offender, sexual predator, from what I've read, that sexual predators, there's always a criminal charge attached to it. Now, are there cases, situations where somebody can have predatory behavior and not offend? Can a pedophile have predatory behavior and not, grooming tactics or techniques? Is that what we're talking about, physical contact in terms of people can say things that's inappropriate to a child. That's totally inappropriate. You have a big butt. Ooh, I would love to get in them jeans. There's a number of things. It's harassment, sexual harassment, is intimidate. Is that predatory behavior? In fact, it is. Now, a part of this can be, part of learning experience, but should our learning experience be one that is abusive or harass someone who does not want to be involved sexually with an individual? I don't know that we can just excuse away certain types of behavior and just say, okay, because I was 14 years old and my hormones. Because one thing is we do know that with children, in growing developmentally, hormonally, that we experience certain things, changes in our body. But then again, that's where communication and talking with your children about their body, about their sexual development, sex education. The onus is on parents, so that when I start having these feelings, when I started masturbating, I started doing whatever, having these dreams and all that kind of stuff, that you keep it in the bedroom. You don't go and, okay, there go my little sister right there. There's an opportunity right now, because now you mess little sister up because she's performing oral sex, and we can't say, well, just because you were growing and developing that you had the right to violate this innovation. There is a thing called boundaries, and we have to be careful and clear about sexual boundaries. And it's not just it's within the family context, but it's relationship based. Boundaries with my body, who can touch me, how they can touch me, where they can touch me. Another high incidence of sexual abuse that happens, with bathing and changing diapers of kids, So looking at a little baby, if you're changing their diaper and they're got their legs tight and they're trying to, that can be an indication that something is going wrong. I have a guest in the studio that's joined me. She's a counselor, therapist, Arnita Holloman, good morning. How are you doing?
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the Eric Vaughn Show with special guest this morning, Jermaine Reed and engineer Keon. So you can feel free to join into this conversation. We will be shifting pretty soon to our second topic, which is going to be on collective trauma, looking at the impact of trauma on the community as a whole. We often talk about it on an individual level, but we don't look at the impact on a community level. So that's why you're in here. But feel free to chime into this conversation around the profile of a sex offender. One thing I want to share with folks is that sex offenders often minimize their numbers. So in 90% of cases, you keep hearing me say 90% of cases, 90% of cases, because that's the magic number. 90% of cases, 90% of the victims victims of sexual abuse know their offender. In 90% of cases, 90% of sex offenders are going under the radar, which means they can clear a FBI background check, a sex offender background check. They can clear the DOJ background check. They can clear a sheriff background check. Some of them may have never been arrested, but it does not mean that they have not victimized or perpetrated on a child. And what the national statistics show, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, that child sexual abuse often involves more than one single incident. That's the American Academy of Pediatrics. Now, they gave this example. In talking to 99 male sex offenders, court records showed that 136 victims were between this group. But later during treatment in a different setting, there's a different type of disclosure that happens. They eventually confessed to 959 victims between them. That's a lot.
Well, that's huge. And I think I'm glad you have the stats there, because when people are caught for sex offenses, so it's finally come to the authorities' attention and they're arrested or prosecuted, it's rarely their first time.
Very rarely.
And so, I completely understand they're not guilty until, it's done in a court of law. But what we know about sexual abuse, sexual offenders, is that they're typically, habitual. Mm-hmm. And so they've done this a number of times, usually before it ever comes to the attention of authorities. Right.
So I'm glad you brought that up. What I want to share with the audience this time, and maybe some other folks who work in this area, feel free to call into 414-444-5250. Maybe you can share some tips with the audience based on your expertise. But in terms of what parents can do to prevent child sexual abuse within and outside of the family, there's a couple things. One, in early childhood, parents can teach their children the proper names of their body parts.
Absolutely. We want to call it all these nicknames and
TT
all the
all that kind of stuff.
Poo-poo or whatever. I don't know, whatever you call it. But it's important to teach them proper names. Like you were saying earlier, teaching them proper touch. And I think one of the places where we go wrong, and maybe it's not just our community, but in other communities, is we have an assumption that if you birth a child, you know how to be a parent.
True.
And so that's not necessarily the case. I mean, I've heard it over and over. Oh, you'll know what to do when you have a child. Well, how does that happen? And so we need to understand child development, child sexual development, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
And so if you don't understand what the normal processes for child development are, it's going to be difficult to understand what's abnormal.
Exactly. And we all, there's some markers or some stages of development that every human being goes through, life stages, and we all progress through that stage or that cycle at different intervals. But we have some markers, an idea that, at a certain point, a baby should be walking. At a certain point, a baby should be talking. Now, if your baby 5 years old ain't said mama, daddy, something, there may need to be further evaluation because it's not normal, I'm not even sure when babies start talking. When they start talking, like 8 months, 9 months. What they be saying?
Well, they start talking about they're around 13, 18 months. They start to say, they're saying one word. They're not saying full sentences.
We having a conversation?
That point. They're not having a conversation. I mean, they start babbling after a few months,
and that's part of communication.
That's how they're learning language. So when they're baba dada, most people are excited. Like he said, daddy first. He's just learning how to speak, but. That's the beginning stages of learning language.
Got you. And parents can also, or caregivers, teach young children about the privacy of body parts and that no one has the right to touch their bodies if they don't want that to happen. Children should also learn to respect the privacy of other people. That's really important.
But that's back to boundaries. I worked in the prison system, and that was one thing that it always came up with clients. I saw male and female inmates. Boundaries was always an issue. For many of them, they had never learned proper boundaries, whether those were sexual boundaries, just physical space boundaries, or whatever. That's, an issue for children to learn. They have to be taught proper boundaries.
All right, we're going to continue this conversation on the other side of this break. You're listening to the Eric Vaughn Show. It's 8:18. We'll be right back.
Good. Roll on.
We're rolling on the river.
Rolling.
All right. It's 8:24 a.m. on Tuesday morning, April the 19th. You're listening to the Eric Vaughn Show. We're talking about child sexual abuse prevention. This is Child Abuse Prevention Month in America. And one thing about it, we all know kids and we love kids. Kids are they're nonpartisan. Kids are just kids. And, they deserve to have a childhood that is free of abuse and violence and harassment and manipulation. Everybody's entitled to a healthy childhood. That should just
Absolutely.
be, all right,
Absolutely.
And so the purpose of this conversation is certainly not to indict or to condemn, but it's to inform, it's to engage in a hard conversation, but in a safe place. And if you'd like to join this conversation around child sexual abuse prevention, you can call 414-444-5250. Over the break, our guest, Anita Holloman, she said something so powerful as relates to the body. The body memory is what they call it. The touch, the power of touch. The body registers and records every touch.
Mm-hmm. The body keeps the score.
It keeps the score. Mm-hmm. Whether that's a good touch or a bad touch, the body keeps the score. And we have to remember, so we have to protect our bodies, protect our children. And sometimes because we don't have these conversations, not talking about it won't make it go away. We have to talk about it so we can inform kids because that's an ounce of prevention. We don't believe in being proactive and preventive. We just assume that, you'll learn on your own. And the last thing we don't want our kids getting sex education off the TV.
Oh, goodness, no.
The music they listen to. That's not what we want them to learn about sex education. As parents, that's what we have to do. Now, we have DK on the Eric Vaughn Show. DK, do you have a brief question or comment as it relates to this topic?
Yes, I do. Quite a few things. I want to start off with parenting at home. It starts off at home, like a baseball game. It starts off at home base and it ends at home base. You will not score a complete run unless you start at home and end at home.
There you go.
This is where the problem is at. A lot of the parents are very young now versus the time back in the days, and they're having babies at a very young age, and they're unexperienced. They have the kids too young, and they throw them into the system, and they're exposed to a lot of things around the house, things that people they shouldn't be around, and that's a very big problem. And I don't know how you feel about just what I'm about to say, but I don't. People may take this any way they want to take it, but it's just my opinion.
Yes, sir.
I know a lot of other countries don't allow same-sex marriage, but America does. And but I personally think that it's wrong to allow the same-sex couple to adopt a kid. According to the Bible, it's one man, one woman.
Okay.
For marriage. Okay. But we threw that out, and then we allow it. But I think it is an ugly, crying, ridiculous, pathetic shame to allow 2 men and 2 women. It's bad enough what you're doing is wrong. Okay, but if you want to do that, that's on you. Okay, but it should be a law to protect kids from being exposed to same-sex adoption. I'm totally against that, but it's just the laws are just so corrupt, and it needs to be changed. A lot of things need to be changed when it comes, like the sex predators. Once they out, they slide right into your neighborhood, and and right by the school. And once again, sex predators, they should be, personally, I think they should be all in one location.
Okay.
And not by a school or around the corner from, or 4 blocks away from where the child got molested at. That needs to be addressed, because it's not a good thing. And it's a lot of them out here. My God, there's tons of them. You go online, you'd be surprised what you see that been charged with this.
But DK, if I can interrupt, because I just thought about something as you were talking. What you're talking about is registered sex offender, but what about that 90%? I mean, if we had to find a place to shift and put everybody who are undercover sex offenders or have an attraction to youth, where would we house them? Because what we have is sex offenders or folks who have inappropriate attraction to children, have violated children who are in our own family. It's very pervasive. So I don't know, in terms of designating an island or a community, a country or a city to put everybody. I mean, if that's 90%, that's a large population. But I appreciate your comment, DK.
Okay, one small thing.
Go ahead.
It's a lot of room. It's more land than anything. I mean, isn't it quite amazing how we could find money for those sorry Brewers? Isn't it quite amazing how we could find money for those losing Bucks? Isn't it quite amazing how we could find money to rebuild Lambeau Field and to build a Marquette interchange and to put a train downtown? It's amazing how we can find money to do what they want to do, but things that make sense, there's no money for it. There's money out there for it. There's plenty of money. They said, do they want to do it? It can be one community. It can be several buildings. I mean, y'all did the crime, so hey, I mean, you got to deal with the consequences, like a DWI or OWI. Come
DK,
on.
I think that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir. I think that some of the things that we're talking about are ways that we can address things individually and as a larger community, but we can't put everything on everybody else. And so if we're talking about teaching our children boundaries, teaching them safe touch, good touch, bad touch, that kind of thing, those are things that we can do as parents and as family members and people that are, concerned with or entrusted with the care of those children, that we can't relegate everything to another community or another group of people to take care of our children. Because
what we're talking about here today, I appreciate, Ms. Holloman, you talking about what we can do on an individual and community level. We don't have to march or demonstrate about this. We don't have to pass a law. We don't have to collect 5,000 signatures. These are things that we can do today by sitting down, having a conversation with our kids. We can look at national, local stories and build a conversation at the dinner table around these topics, around your body, and in terms of how you respect yourself, but also how, important your body is, that what relationships should look like between you and the coach, or you and the teacher, you and the Sunday school teacher, you and your mentor, you and, what do those, you and your father, you and your mother, when you get to a certain age, daddy shouldn't be bathing little Susie. It's inappropriate.
Absolutely.
I remember seeing a photo. Well, I don't know, because I don't know what was on Under the Water, but it was a guy in the bathtub with his granddaughter, and, she was real little and he was much older, and, there was a frenzy on Facebook about that, Now, they was in the bathtub, they went in the swimming pool. Some people said, what's the difference and whatever, But my point is, at a certain point, unless that child has some type of physical handicap or disability, and dad is only caring for this child, is that a scenario different versus, and they don't have
But I
a
mean,
home
does
health
that mean
aide?
you have to get in the bathtub with
Well,
them?
you ain't got to get in the bathtub, but there are some kids who have some physical
Right.
challenges, and dad just being a dad, But if the child is developmentally on task, and dad is developmentally on task, there's some things you just don't see, you don't allow, and what we have a tendency to do is look the other way. I didn't see that. I didn't know that. And you know what? And one thing I want to be clear, because I don't want to, impose or, not impose, but suggest that maybe perhaps sex offenders are just these female white teachers, but it happens in all communities. And I'm reminded, do you remember the producer from the Fugees a couple years back, Aswad Allende? He was a video director, and he
Was
believed...
he the one having sex with his children?
Yeah, he had fathered 6 children with 3 of his own daughters. And he was sentenced to 50 years in prison for sexual assault. The sentence came in addition to a 40-year prison term he received 20 months prior. That's not healthy. And his daughter, she gave a statement. She said, I can't describe, and this is what's important, how you hurt me and my sisters. It's indescribable what you did, because that relationship, that trust, that violation was broken. And so we have to learn how to protect relationships, how to protect our children. Now let me go to a statistic, and I know we have a call, and we're going to be taking that call very shortly, and we're going to give folks an opportunity to win another registration to the Color a Child Welfare Conference on May 17th. What else can parents do? You know what? If your kids come up with some new shoes, your little daughter, she got her hair done, or, you got to be
New
careful,
cell
because
phone
grooming
or-
tactics or
absolutely.
techniques of these individuals who have a unhealthy attraction to your kid. See, that grooming process can take years. One thing about sex offenders,
patient.
pedophile, they're very patient. And what we also know, and I've done extensive research on this topic over the years. I've been talking about this for 6-7 years publicly. In the faith-based community, I've talked about it, written about it in Black Women's 50+ magazine, conferences. I've done a lot around this topic. One thing we do know in terms of a high-risk population, children who are parented by in a single-parent home are at the highest risk of sexual abuse. Children who are parented by a single female, because what that predator, what that pedophile, what that sex offender, what that opportunist knows is that you might need help with little Johnny.
Yeah.
And so I can take him off your hand. I can mentor. I can show up at the coach at the basketball. I can take him. And you're like, oh, look, Mr. So-and-so, he real nice. See, that's what I'm talking about. I wish his father was more involved in his life. And we understand that we do need men in our community to step up, but we have to protect our children. And there are just some men and women who will take advantage of a situation. We have Tyrone on the Eric Vaughn Morning Show. Tyrone, do you have a brief question or comment?
Yeah, good morning, Jermaine.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning, Milwaukee, and thanks for taking my call. Good morning to the woman that's in the studio. Forgive me for the
Good
name
morning.
that eluded
It's okay.
me, but your guest and the woman that's in the studio. Good morning.
Good morning.
And DK kind of touched on it, but it's biblical, true enough. That's all sin. But you're saying where can we put them? Well, it's global because it's happening in every country. The girls that were taken by Boko Haram, and the families won't take them back because they don't want to have a Boko Haram baby in the family. Those girls that were missing over there. But
right.
to keep it here at home, I mean, you touched on it a bit there. The lyrics and drop it like it's hot, pop that coochie, all that stuff.
Yeah.
That stuff's got to be taken out of there, because that's exactly. I was over at the park one day. I seen the teenage girl showing the little 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old baby how to, drop it like it's hot. She just getting down. I'm like, man, come on, that stuff like that's got to stop, and these advertisers. This time of year, putting Oh man, you look in there, you got the youngsters in the bathing suits and bikinis and stuff there. I mean, parents take your children to the store, pretty much got an idea of what they want and stuff, female panties and stuff, and all this kind of advertising and stuff has got to be, and that'll go down, a whole jurisdictional thing of, it's my freedom to advertise, but, the advertising, youngsters that basically don't have any clothes on with all this stuff, and they're showing all these youngsters in bathing suits and, female panties and all this stuff. I think the media has a lot to, look in the mirror at how they're portraying our children as well. Then. Thank you very much, Jermaine. Good job.
Right. Good morning, Tyrone. Thank you, Tyrone.
Tyrone, I think that you're making a good point about how the media, puts out all these advertisements of women or young women in underwear and provocative ways, because we know that sex sells. And so we often talk about how the media controls, so much of, or everything that we see and that kind of thing, but we don't think about or take as much responsibility for what we can control. If we stop watching it, if we stop buying, if we stop, if we change the channel and decide that's not a station I'm going to watch because these are the things that they show, I mean, we can take back some of that control, and we absolutely can control what our children are exposed to.
Yeah, I would agree. I love how DK has said that, everything starts at home base and it ends at home base. And we want to have a complete home run. We cannot avoid our responsibility and what we have control. See, I always talk about managing your space. There's some things I don't have control over. I don't know what other folks are going to do, but what is my responsibility? What do I have power over? What's in my responsibility? How can I manage this situation? And there's a lot more that we can do that we don't do. Sharice, you are on the Eric Vaughn Morning Show. Good morning.
I had a question. I had some neighbors that stayed like 4 houses down from my house, and one day I guess there's like a blended family, but there's 2 moms who co-parent. I don't know if they're I guess they're partners or whatever, and the two boys, like a 3rd grader and a 5th grader, for some reason they were playing with my kids, and my kids saw the 2 boys kissing. And so, immediately I thought, oh, my God, somebody must be messing with him, because at 3rd grade, they usually aren't so sexual, or they not, they usually aren't like that. They're usually like, ooh, girls are, they're just not comfortable, and they were so comfortable doing that. And I was thinking, like, maybe somebody's messing with them. But then it's like, well, I don't know what they see in their house. Maybe they see people being comfortable with touching, girls touching girls, or boys touching boys, or girls and boys touching, that is comfortable for them and it's no big deal. So I didn't think I should do anything, because, they're well taken care of, their hair, clothes, all that. I just didn't understand why they felt so comfortable with kissing, because they made my kids uncomfortable to the point they're like, Mom, we don't even want to play with them. That was just too much. So at that point, I just, I kind of didn't know what to do. I just kind of like, well, I hope nothing's going on.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Are you asking a question?
I'm asking a question. Like, what in a situation like that is...
Well, there's a couple of things that you could possibly consider to do. One is, you said they were kissing in the mouth?
Yeah, they were kissing. Their lips were touching.
Okay, and and so, and they were brothers, or they were... brothers?
I don't know if there was like...
Well, one is I would say that you should went and talk to the parents and told them what you observed, and not from an angle of right, wrong, indifferent, but, this is what I observed. This may be a concern of yours. Should you contact the authorities over something like that? I don't think so, but I think the first step was to contact, because one is I wonder if, whether they were related, and not that it was right or wrong, but if this was another kid in the neighborhood and somebody kissed that person in the mouth, was it forced? Was it, what was going on around that? It's getting the information. The thing about mandatory reporting is that if you suspect child abuse or neglect, if you suspect it, have a suspicion of it, then folks say, well, you need to call 220-SAFE. You know, if you suspect, not everything is child abuse, not everything is neglect. But in a situation like that, I'll say the first step is to have a conversation with the parents. All right. Thank you, Sharice, for calling, and you have a great day. Enjoy the weather. And you are listening to the Eric Vaughn Show with Jermaine Reed, Arnita Holloman, and Keon.
Hello.
Good morning, Ann. You got a quick question, comment?
Yeah, I just have a comment listening to your show this morning. It takes me back to, well, I was like about 6 or 7, and I have like 9 brothers. And so, of course, I wanted to do whatever the boys did. So they were, you know, climbing the trees and stuff. And so I was climbing the trees, and I had my little, you know, dress on, and so you could see my underwear. So I guess they went and told my dad, and I got a big spanking for that. And I was like, wow, you know, it wasn't my fault. But anyway, my dad passed when I was 12 years old, and my mom remarried. And my stepfather kind of focused on me. He would have my brothers dancing and stuff. And then he wanted me to dance. And I was shy. And then, the way I was raised by my real father, I just felt uncomfortable doing stuff like that. Even though my mother was right there, and she would encourage me like, well, go ahead and dance. And I wouldn't, I just felt uncomfortable doing it. Years later, when I was like about 15, my mother and I, we would argue about, clothes I wanted to wear, the fashionable dresses and everything. And my stepfather would just observe, but he wouldn't say anything. So finally one day, he pulled me to the side and he said, I know you like wearing all these little clothes that the girls wear and, fashionable stuff, and I'll give you money and your mom don't have to know anything about it, and I'll just come in your bedroom at night and, fool around with you and this and that. And so what I'm saying is it goes back to, when you're very young. And had it not been, I think, for my father instilling that in me, just certain things girls don't do, and everything. And even my mom, she was just blind to it. So sometimes it takes someone else, another adult, to, recognize these things. So going forward today, I'm just hypersensitive, about issues such as that, little girls sitting on men's laps or, showing their underwear or showing too much. And it goes back to the way you were raised, and it's never too late to start when they're, very young, with instilling this in them, what's wrong and what's right about, these issues.
And
Thank you. Have a good day.
But Ann,
Yes.
before you leave, let me ask you this question. You said something so profound, and there is statistics that that a high percentage of the sexual abuse victims, that those situations where they were victimized by a step brother, and sometimes, I think there's a powerful lesson in your story in terms of how relationships need to be protected. The fact that your father gave you information, gave you a tool, gave you a weapon to protect yourself. If you didn't have that reference point, and see, that is the problem, because we're so busy doing all these other things, talking about everything else, but we don't sit down and talk to our children about their body, about what folks could be doing or shouldn't be doing when it comes down to your body.
And it doesn't matter who that person is.
Exactly. So that's probably because your father didn't know that this other guy was going to come out, but it was protecting you. It was a sense of giving you some assurance, insurance. Right. But my question is, can you see how that experience that you had at 15 years old can influence your behavior or impacts your behavior in terms of how you relate to people 20, 30 years later?
Exactly. It does. It does.
Thanks.
It really does.
And before you go, I don't know if anybody ever has, but I just want to tell you I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said before you go, I don't know if anyone has ever said it to you before, but I just want to tell you that I'm sorry.
For that experience.
I'm sorry that happened to you. That was not your fault. You weren't responsible for it, and he should have never propositioned you in that way.
And that's
so
the
I
message
just
that
want
we
to
need
say
to tell
I'm sorry.
All the truth.
Thank you. And I just wanted to add to that, I told my mom, I told my grandmother, because they thought that my stepfather was such a great guy because he stepped in and married my mom after she had all these kids, and everything, and he provided for us, and they really didn't believe me. And years later, after my mom died and I was an adult, and I saw my stepfather, and he apologized to me. No one else was around but me and him, and he said, "I'm sorry."
Wow. Thanks a lot. And that's another very valuable point. And we're going to take Jean, who's going to be our last caller. If your child discloses a history of sexual abuse, you need to listen to them carefully. You need to listen to them carefully and take their disclosure serious because, again, national data says that in less than 1%, actually said 0.5%, in 0.5% of cases, children lie about sexual abuse. That's less than 1%. So kids lie about stealing candy, they lie about stealing money, they lie about stealing cookies. But when children say somebody touched me, typically in most instances and cases, it's fact. And our responsibility is to search it out. And too many times children go to their parents or they refuse to go because they don't feel like they're going to be believed. The other thing, and I think is so important, is, again, talk to your children about sexual abuse and trauma prevention. Have those conversations. Simply ask them, has anybody touched you? Has anybody propositioned you? Has anybody invited you to do X, Y, Z? Open up that opportunity for them to share because a lot of times victims won't say anything because they've been threatened.
Right.
I'll kill your mom. I'll kill you. I'll kill your dog. I'll kill you. And so there's silence. And so what we don't want to do is train our kids to be silent. Jean, do you have a quick question and comment? We only have a few more minutes on the show today. Good morning, Jean.
Good morning. Would you please repeat the telephone number? It was something safe. And tell me a little bit about it.
Oh, 220-SAFE, which is 220-7233. That is the Child Protection Service line so that if an individual feels, and particularly if you work in a certain career field like in medical or you have access to children, you're a therapist or you're a foster parent, you are a teacher, medical professional, you are obligated by law to report instances of abuse or neglect or a situation where you feel there is a high suspicion that abuse or neglect is occurring. And then Child Protection Services will send out an initial assessment worker. They will determine whether or not there is any credibility to what your suspicions are or what you have witnessed. And if they screen it in, then there will be an investigation that takes about 60 days to complete. They will transfer it to another organization called Community Impact. If it is suspicious that there was sexual abuse that occurred, they may contact law enforcement. Then a criminal investigation may happen, which is independent of the Child Protection Service investigation. Again, that phone number is 414-220-720. But so thank you for calling, Jean. And other piece, if you suspect that your family has suffered or a child is dealing with sexual abuse, you can call Aurora Healthcare, their Sexual Assault Treatment Center, at 414-219-5550. Or you can also go to your child's pediatrician. You can talk with them. And then there's also the Healing Center. I don't have that number in front of me, but the Healing Center, you can look it up online. They work with children who have been victimized. But talk about it. Don't sweep it under the carpet. Our children are way too much valuable. Thank you. It's been great on the Eric Vaughn Show. Hopefully I'll be back in the future. You all be well. Be safe. Until next time.